They may sound nuts, but so do the Wright brothers. Now, here's Fleeger and Briggs.
Welcome back into It's Just Sports here on the 12-Ounce Sports Radio Network. I'm Rick Fleeger, as always joined by my octogenarian friend, if I could spit that out, Mr. Rick Briggs.
It doesn't pay to be mean.
Well, it's what I do. It's kind of my thing. Now, what if I came on here and said, and welcome in my best buddy and pal, the greatest guy you ever met, Rick Briggs? How would you react to that?
I'd probably have to put on a mask because you obviously have the flu or something.
You would take
delirious,
your headphones off, throw them at me, and run out of the studio. That's what you do. But hey, for more great content like this, right, sports content as you're hearing here, check it out, all of it out over at 12ouncesportsradio.com and on Twitter at 12OZ Sports. That's at 12-Ounce Sports.
You better believe it. We are Fleeger and Briggs, and you know what? Don't get excited because it's just sports, but it's calmed down a little bit since the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
We have a little bit of college basketball going on, so I'm a little more excited about it than you are. You kind of like the 3 or 4 dominant teams, the favorites going in, and can somebody knock them off? I'm kind of pumped up for like this open field where there are, I would say, legitimately 15 to 20 teams that you could actually make a case that they could actually win the tournament.
Well, right, and let me clarify. In about, 3 weeks here, when conference tournaments begin, this is going to be ideal, right? Because you're going to see, we don't even have to wait for the NCAA tournament. I think we're going to see madness in the conference tournaments. That's when it's going to be great. I assume the NCAA tournament's going to be great. Although you could make an argument then this will be the year it'll all go chalk. If there's every year every one seed gets through because this one looks so wide open. But I think what this does do is kind of, here's what I feel like. There aren't any big upsets this year, so it kind of makes the regular season less interesting. It's a fun watch because you don't know what you're going to get game over game, week over week, no matter who you're paying attention to, what conference. But nothing's a shock. I do like a Duke or a Kentucky, at this point of the year being undefeated. San Diego State being undefeated, while a great thing, it doesn't really trip my trigger at this point of the season.
Right.
I'll get interested in that once we get to the tournament. But nothing surprises me. If Miami goes into Duke and wins, I'm not going to be stunned. In other years, it'd be like, holy cow, how did that just happen?
Well, that's true. You're exactly right. There's, you could pick a team, say like Missouri, whatever they are, 12-13 or whatever. But if they up and upset Baylor, it's not like we would go, oh, my God, like you would, like you're talking about a few years ago, if a Duke or a Carolina or a Kansas would get beat by somebody of that ilk.
Yeah, that's all it is. But I think come conference tournament time, it's going to be exciting.
Oh, I think it's going to be great.
But you're right. You look top, and maybe it's just the names. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Baylor, San Diego State, Dayton, Kansas, we throw them in there, are that dominant. Maybe it's because it's Baylor, San Diego State, and Dayton. I have a hard time believing it. Gonzaga, I left Gonzaga out, of course, who they're not going to lose again until potentially they get to the NC. Maybe it's just the names where you feel like it's wide open, and maybe these teams are that good. I've watched Baylor a little bit. I still don't know much about them, but they look impressive, don't they? I mean, wow.
Well, yeah, you think about it. The second game of the year, whatever, back on November 8th, they lost to a very, very average Washington team. But that was their second game of the year. Since then they haven't lost. But just going through the schedule, they beat Villanova. They beat Arizona. They beat Butler. They've beaten Texas twice. They've beaten Kansas by 12. They've beaten Oklahoma State, Oklahoma. They've beaten Iowa State twice. Oklahoma State twice, I guess I should say, as far as that goes. They swept Texas. I mean, these aren't the juggernauts that we're used to talking about, but these are pretty good teams.
Certainly.
They're spanking them.
Yeah. It's a dominant. It's a big team. It's an athletic team. I feel the same way about Gonzaga. I think going into this thing, they feel like the favorite to me. Now, you always have that issue. have they faced stiff enough competition? Because they always play now, since they've become, a consistently top-tier team. They play a real tough schedule in November, in the first part of December. Right. But then they're basically on bye until March then, it feels like. Every now and again, St. Mary's will be good. St. Mary's is no good this year. They can't even keep them within 20, which it used to be when St. Mary's would only lose by 17 to Gonzaga. You'd say, all right, well, there's their test. So it's all, but they feel like the dominant team. It's probably just that, Duke can be had by anybody, judged by that. I'm still stunned by what I saw on Saturday with Duke and Carolina. As bad as Carolina's been, and Duke lost that game twice and still came out of there with a win. Maybe that's maybe that's a good thing.
Well, that's
for
the thing, though. But that's Duke and Carolina,
right? Exactly.
That wasn't Duke and Georgia Tech. I mean, that was Duke and Carolina, where anything can happen. These are bitter rivals from since when I was a child,
right?
And you know how long ago that was.
We're real long. We're talking
exactly.
silent movies.
Yeah, and you throw in Florida State, you throw in your Louisvilles, you throw in your Virginias, Pitt, and et cetera. It's a tough conference,
right?
And I'm a little partial, but I tell you what, as the season rolls on, Louisville's looking like a real heavy coming into this tournament.
Somehow they're doing this quietly.
Yeah,
they're really running through. The ACC's down in terms of the top to bottom, right? And Duke isn't what they normally are, and Carolina's been outright bad, and Virginia kind of dealing with the fallout of the championship. They're struggling. Syracuse is no good. There's kind of, Louisville, Duke, Florida State, and then there's a big clump in the middle, and then the end of the conference is really bad. So it's down a little bit. So I think Louisville gets disrespected. I've seen them in person once already. I've watched them more than I'd like to on TV, as I'm not a Louisville fan like you are. But that's a team that can match up with anybody. Now, they can lose to anybody. I've seen, like I said, they should have lost to Pitt twice. They got bailed out by some calls.
Right.
They got bailed out by some freshman mistakes in the last 2 minutes of games by a Pitt team. I've seen it against other teams. They can be had, but they can match up with anybody. That athletically, size-wise, they can shoot the ball. They can score. They can go inside and score. That's a team. If you're looking for, does Louisville count as a blue blood? They're right on the edge of it. If they're not, they're kind of
right.
That's a traditional power that might slide in as a 2 seed, maybe even a 3 seed, depending on how the conference goes. That should be among the favorites to win that. Who I would favor them over a Dayton, as good as Dayton's been. I would favor them over a San Diego State, even as they sit undefeated. That'd be the kind of team I think somebody like that would run into and would take them out.
And no disrespect, but I can't buy into San Diego State. I love what they're doing, don't get me wrong, but you just look at the schedule, and you look at an ACC schedule, or you look at even an A-10 schedule, and it just doesn't match up.
Right.
And, you take a Dayton at 21-2, they've had more impressive wins in the A-10 than San Diego State has.
Yeah, A-10's been reasonable. Even Duquesne
Rhode Island's good, an 18-win team right now. St. Bonaventure's won 16. Richmond, VCU, Duquesne, and St. Louis have all won 17 games.
Yeah.
There's some quality matchups in that conference.
Yeah, it's been a tough matchup there. So it'll be interesting to see. But it's kind of hard. I guess the point is to find storylines right now. When we get into conference tournament play, you're not going to be able to shut me up about it. But until then, there's not a lot of storylines because nothing really surprises me this year. When I'm sitting here and my top 5 include Baylor, San Diego State, and Dayton, it's really hard to surprise me with the outcome of any random conference game in the middle of the week right now.
Oh, I agree.
So it'll be great in a couple of weeks, but right now it's just sort of
we've
hard.
We've got, about 3 weeks left in the season?
Yeah,
and then the March Madness starts, and then and this is when you and I start getting giddy. We once we get through the NCAA starts, then we get the Masters, which just I'll pull my underwear up over my head for that one, and then we have like the NFL draft, which isn't that big of a deal, but at least that's out of the way. Now we know, okay, well the Steelers picked up so and so, the Broncos picked up so and so, and things of that nature. NHL playoffs will be coming up, and they go through basically training camp, and then it starts rolling with football.
Yeah, so we can get through the slog of the MLB season.
Now, for those of you that are new to, It's Just Sports, my partner Rick and I, we are based in Western Pennsylvania. And we'll probably not be real heavy into baseball. The Pittsburgh Pirates have a $43 million payroll, and
imagine?
we can count the losses to 100, and see how quickly they can get there. But I tell you what, it's just a dismal, bleak outlook as far as I'm concerned.
How does the league allow that to go on?
I don't know.
I can live with, and I think the league can live with the old Florida, now Miami Marlins model, where they'll do that, right? Their payroll will be 7 sandwiches and a pack of gum for 3 years. And then all of a sudden they'll whip up and they'll bring in every big name free agent and they'll make a 2-year run at it and then poof, let it go again.
Right.
Pittsburgh doesn't do it. And then somehow through duct tape and smoke and mirrors and popsicle sticks and miracles, they go on a 3-year run where they're competing for the division. They're going to the wild card game. And as they're winning a division or competing for a division, they're selling off pieces. And then they're 1 or 2 players away, and then rather than acquire those 1 or 2
they get rid of a couple.
They get rid of more, and now they go in a full-blown tank mode. And then Major League Baseball and its fans and the Pittsburgh Pirate fans are supposed to believe, well, now we're taking the Astros model where we're ripping it down.
Yeah.
And no, you're not.
You've been doing it for 15 years.
30.
Well, 30, yeah, but actually the second time, from when they actually thought, okay, we've got a good team, and they kept losing the playoff game. But, now we're rebuilding yet again, and they just not going to unless you start paying people.
Well, and I'm sorry, and look, I have no sympathy for the Yankees, the Red Sox, I think the Rangers fit into that Dodgers of the world, right? But if I'm one of these franchises who, to build up loser franchises like exist in Pittsburgh, I have to pay a luxury tax to run my business, and then this clown takes the money. So all the TV revenue's coming from me. It ain't coming out of Pittsburgh.
Right.
So I'm giving you your fair share of my TV money. I'm paying you a luxury tax because I'm trying to compete, and then you're rolling out a $43 million payroll. If I'm the other owners, this clown's gone. You're out of here. If I'm the league, we are shutting you down. Obviously there's nothing in an agreement anywhere that they can force them to do that, but this really is an embarrassment as the league pumps these smaller markets up. Now, that's not the solution, and we can talk about that another day in terms of salary caps and blah, blah, and all the things that should be happening, but this is the MLB's method to keep these smaller markets, I'm saying that in air quotes, afloat, and then this guy is just taking all that money, shoving it into his back pocket, putting a new ski lift at the resort he owns here in Western Pennsylvania, and putting out a $43 million payroll. If I'm the league, if I'm the other owners, I'm saying, no, stop, no,
right.
This is nonsense. I'm not doing it.
And now baseball, in yet another feeble attempt to bolster the ever-failing product. A report surfaced Monday that Major League Baseball is seriously considering a new playoff format. I don't know if you've seen this.
It was on my list to go over today.
14 of 30 teams make the playoffs. And, the new wild card round would be 3-game series. Well, they did that back when they first turned into divisions.
Yeah, the divisionals were 3. Were they 3 the first time around?
Way back in the late 60s, early 70s, when first time they had divisions, it was best 2 out of 3.
Well, they didn't have divisional rounds, so you mean...
No, you had a division champion play. The East played the West.
Okay.
And it was a 2 out of 3 series to see who went to the World Series.
Oh, okay, I'm fine. I'm talking about since they went to this method with the wild card, the divisional.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember.
3. Don't you remember? I think
was it 3 and then went to 5? Because it's 5 now.
84.
No, you're going back way too far. I'm talking this most recent iteration.
Well, Well, yeah, maybe that was still Division II. I just remember the '84 Cubs
in
ahead of
the
the Padres 2-0, and they lost 3 in a row. And of course, the Padres got spanked in the World
it
Series.
was East and West, and then. But anyhow, so
yeah, you're right.
So, but this thing's nonsense. First of all, let's just put that out of there. Number one, let's start, and we'll break it down to what this thing is and all the absurdity along the way. You play a 162 game season. It already ends in the middle of November now. That you've added the one,
which is ludicrous if you think about it, because they've had 162 games since I think like 54 or 59 or something like that. They went from 154 games to 162. And, the World Series is over in October.
Right, yeah. Well, there's more off days. They used to play double headers back then, right? Things like that. So you're already playing 162 games. You've added I don't want to say you've added 2 rounds of playoffs. You really added one day with the wild card game, and then an extra round of playoffs, and then the divisional series, and there seems to be more time off in between those. So now you're doing this where there's essentially going to be, 3 game series, and then is it a 5? I don't even know where they're going. Then the 2 7-game series. It's going to be December before this thing ends. Look, I get what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to capitalize on what the NHL does, what the NBA does, even what football to a degree by having wild cards and having that wild card round of the playoffs. But I'm sorry, when you have a sport where you play every day and you play 162 games, where we're talking about how bad the Pirates are going to be, they are guaranteed, Rick, to win 45 or 50 games. The Yankees, the Red Sox, the Astros, whoever's great this year is guaranteed to lose 40, because this is what happens when you play when you play a 162 game season, you don't need half your league in the playoffs.
No.
It invalidates your entire regular season. Your regular season's almost invalid as it is by being that long. That's why it always made sense to me. The wild card thing, as much as those are fun games to watch, the intensity of a one and done kind of situation, but when you play 162 games, you're letting it shake out already. And that's why I liked, before in the old 2-division format that I grew up with, and the East played the West, that was your championship series, and they went on to the World, and that was it.
Right.
And it made sense because you play 160 year on every day for 7 months as it is.
And that exponentially makes more sense than we've had this argument in previous shows on our other shows, where I've always had the problem in college basketball where everybody gets to play in the tournament, if somebody happened to get hot for 3 games, all of a sudden they're the conference champion. If somebody's 30-1, well, you're not the champion.
Right.
Well, that kind of stuff invalidates an excellent season. This is even way worse. 162 games, and some of the notes from the story, in 2014, the Braves and Mets would have been in the wild card at 79 and 83.
Oh, certainly.
I mean, that's ludicrous. 162 games, you win 79 games, and now, we'll let you play 3 games, and maybe you can go advance. I mean, that's ludicrous. The Reds would have made it before that at 80 and 82. It just validates a mediocre season for teams with low payrolls to try to generate interest and, of course, more revenue because they'll be on TV longer and they'll be playing into December.
Yeah, and here's what it does in that regard, and this is kind of where I don't like the playoff structure as it is right now as well. Now, the championship series and the World Series are still strategy. I don't like that divisional round. The wild card certainly in the divisional round. If I have a team that I know I can run around 500 under even the current structure, but certainly in this new structure, I can finish around 500. And then alls I need, if I can go out in free agency or whatever, and I can come up with 2 stud starting pitchers, like it was the Nationals formula this year, really.
Right.
And then they were able to take it through the LCS and the World Series. but it sets you up. You're that team under four games under 500. The Mets would be a perfect example with Syndergaard, and I'm blanking on the other ones. But you have two studs. You get in a 3-game series, you're going to advance. And then you get in a 5-game series, you're going to advance. Now,
right.
Maybe it catches up with you in the LCS, but you get a good balanced team who maybe doesn't have that starting pitching that wins their division over 162 games and needing 5, 6, even 7 starting pitchers to do it. You get knocked out in a 3-game series, whereas you'd be a better matchup for anybody else in a 7-game series. That's the point of 162 games. That's your playoff, right? August and September are your playoffs as far as I'm concerned, and I get what they're trying to do, and people would watch it. But and then this nonsense where, the top-rated team gets the bye, so that would make sense, right? And then the second highest division winner gets to pick their opponent out of the wild card. What is this nonsense?
It's a video game. I'm going to play this guy.
Yeah, we match up better
because he has more righties and I've got more left-handed pitchers or whatever. I want to play this. That's ludicrous. They're turning it into a cartoon show. I just can't. And you know me in baseball. I've been angry at baseball since 1994, and this just feeds the rage. And I'm sorry, it is. They have screwed baseball up to a point where, okay, and this is what really gets me. You go back to the 90s, the steroid era. It saved baseball.
Absolutely.
And now, with this faux integrity, Barry Bonds doesn't get into the Hall of Fame. And you won't see McGuire and Sosa and all these kind of guys because they cheated. You let them. You enjoyed that they saved your game.
Absolutely.
Period. And now they have this integrity, the integrity of the game. And the Astros. We've already covered that, the Astros fiasco. The players are unscathed.
Right.
It's insane. They did it.
Yeah. And this is where the league can't quit stepping on their own joint. Yeah, there's another phrase there my granddad liked to use, but I won't say it here on 12-ounce sports. But they keep stepping on themselves with things like this. That's a perfect point, right? That steroid era, as much as we like to act now like that, is just unfathomable and so horrible to the integrity of the game. It saved the game after that strike year.
Of course it did.
It raised it up. Everybody enjoyed the increased revenue, the increased viewership, everything that came from it. And then they kind of slammed the door on it and said, that's terrible. That's not going to fly anymore. And then, we kind of go through the early 2000s of at least people where people in New York and Boston aren't going to understand this, but people here in Western PA, people in Kansas City, people in places like that, we talk about as the league clumsily tried to find ways to keep things like that, teams like that competitive. And then here it comes, right? From the depths, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Here's the Houston Astros who did it right. The Houston Astros who tore it all down and used analytics, because everybody wants analytics.
Yeah, they use analytics all right.
Analytics and player development and all these things. And now we hold them up. Look, you Pittsburgh, you Kansas City, you Seattle, whoever it is, you can do this too if you just do it the right way. And a lot of that's still true, but what are we going to remember about? Oh, yeah, by the way, they were cheating the entire way through that as well.
Exactly.
And now this. We're going to say we want you to pay for and watch on television and whatever, 162 games, and then after 162 games, we're going to take most of what you just watched and do this.
Yeah.
And now it's going to become a pitching matchup of who can win 2 best-of-3 series. They can't get out of their own way here.
No, and half of these 14 teams are just going to be lackluster, mediocre teams that have no business being in playoffs. It's supposed to be the best team. And that's one thing. You brought up the NHL. But there's so much parity in the NHL. We've seen the 8th seed win the cup. We've seen the 8th seed. Yeah, we've seen the 8th seed advance to the conference finals. We've seen the 7th seed knock off the 2 seed. It doesn't happen in baseball.
Right.
It just doesn't, and it's not going to.
Well,
I mean, you see, NBA is a great example. That 8th seed, why do they even play these games?
They should just take 2.
It's ridiculous.
The thing with hockey is, look, it can be a punchline, and to a non-fan or a real casual fan that makes sense. Well, what's the point of all this? Everybody makes the playoffs anyhow. My thing with that is it's part of the history of the game. It's what the NHL is. All you have to do is play these 82 games, finish in the top half. The NHL as a product doesn't even seem interested. Certainly us as consumers, but the NHL as an entity doesn't seem interested in anything that happens until April either. This is what we do. This is who the NHL is. Conversely, Major League Baseball, like we've said a couple of times, who they are is we play every day for 7 months, and we determine 2 people in each league, then 4 people in each league, then 5 people in each league, and now they want to go to 7 people in each. No, you play 162 games. That is your culture. You could do this. You could play half your league, play 7-game series, cut your league down to 82 games or 81 games, whatever that would be. Start your playoffs in August. I might buy in for that. I mean, I don't give a crap about baseball much as it is right now.
Not the way it is, no.
But as it sits now, you can't just say, all right, then we're going to take the successful model of the NHL and their 100 years of history doing this, and we're just going to plop it in November in Boston when the snow's blowing sideways and it's 8 degrees, and we're going to do – that's stupid. You can't have it both ways.
Right.
Look, everything, it's all about the money, right? Everything's just a revenue grab. But this is the most obvious insulting money grab I've seen in a long time.
And we do so much bashing of the NFL with their inconsistent rulings and refereeing and this kind of things, infraction enforcement, how it's different for this guy over somebody else. But going back to the Astros, we have Pete Rose banned for life. He gambled after he played, okay? I get why he's banned. He gambled on the game, and you're not allowed to do that. But that's when he was a manager, yet he's still banned as a player. They're keeping Bonds, McGuire, and some of these other guys.
We talked about it last week. You're keeping Kurt Schilling out just because of his politics.
Right. Roger Clemens is another good example. They're keeping up because of this. And now, with this Houston Astro thing coming, the players are unscathed.
Right.
Why are these guys punished for life? I mean, you can make the same case. Well, the management let them take steroids, right?
Yeah,
right?
Certainly.
Sure.
They didn't do anything to stop it.
No, exactly. But no, all of a sudden now with the baseball's integrity, we're going to slam this team. We're going to slam the managers. The players, go on about your business, make your millions of dollars, and just don't do it anymore. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's turned into a clown show as far as I'm concerned.
And then this just piled on
and listen
top
to us.
of it.
We are getting so worked up, and it's just sports.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is. And we're on the 12-ounce Sports Network. I'm Rick Briggs. This is my partner, Rick Fleeger.
Indeed. Did you see, speaking of that, before we move off that, I want to talk about the XFL here.
Before you do that, if you got any comments on what we just talked about, drop us a line. asylumfootball@gmail.com, or it's just sports 123, no apostrophe in the it's @gmail.com as well.
Oh, we have a it's just sports Gmail now. I'll be darned. When'd that happen?
Drop us a line. I told you 2 or 3 weeks ago, but you're Mr. You've been busy. I'm cutting you a break. You've been busy.
I'm very self-involved.
And I think you need to start eating spinach or taking iron supplements or whatever. Because I notice your house is very hot now, and you've been telling me the last 2-3 weeks how cold you are.
It's hot in here?
Oh, yeah. And you're sitting there with long sleeve shirts on, and you're not a bit warm, are you?
No. My feet are cold.
I think you need to take an iron supplement.
I like spinach and wedding soup. Does that count?
Yeah. Spinach or spinach? Good. You and Tonelli are getting along just well.
My raspberry vinaigrette. But anyhow, before we move off this Astros, did you see this thing? I think it was a former Toronto pitcher, Mike Bolsinger. I wasn't aware of Mr. Bolsinger's oeuvre until earlier today. But anyhow, he's actually suing the Astros for the sign stealing. Apparently, during the year that was happening, he got called up from the minors, 1 out, and he gives up 4 runs, 4 hits, and 3 walks. And there's actually an interview with him right after. He said, it's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. It's like they knew every pitch that was coming. He got demoted right after that game and never made it back to the majors. So now he's suing the Astros. So this is certainly going to get thrown out, but I think it brings the point of how big a deal this is and how, to kind of to your point, in the players getting off unscathed, how enriched they became, right? The Jose Altuve's, these guys who have, George Springer's, these guys who have become stars, who benefited from this, and the kind of people it could affect. Look, this is a stupid lawsuit because, yeah, he got demoted based on that game, but then he had, I assume, many more years in AAA he could have got back, right? So I think this should be thrown out, but it really shows the absurdity and what this does. This isn't just about wins and loss. I don't care. Vacate the World Series. Everybody's screaming that. Shut up. What does that mean? All the fans still have the T-shirts, still watch the game, still enjoyed it. That means nothing. I'm saying when they take away, when a coach cheats, when John Calipari every 3 years has one taken away from him. What's that mean? That's junk. Get that out of here. But this is what it does do. There are probably other pitchers, this Mr. Bolsinger probably isn't going to be the only one trying to get some relief on this thing. You cost me my career.
Yeah. It's not done shaking out, and it's going to get uglier as it goes, especially if this progresses a little bit. You're going to see some more people coming out of the woodwork, and it could turn into an avalanche of frivolous lawsuits as well.
And I think they should all get thrown out.
In perspective, we look. Here's an article, very, very quickly on CBS. Boston choosing payroll over winning. Because they dealt Mookie Betts and so forth. Their payroll is around $217 million right now.
Poor babies.
Last year was north of $240 million. And they're saying they're being cheapskates. Hey, Pittsburgh's rolling out $40 million. I mean, that is the improprieties in baseball.
No.
The Yankees, the Sox, the Dodgers, a few other ones. St. Louis is always tough.
Yeah.
But the rest of them is just,
Yeah.
Like you said, Miami may have a good team 1 year or 2 years.
Right.
And then they unload. Baltimore's never good. Pittsburgh's never good. Cincinnati's never good. Keep going.
Cincinnati's spending some money this year.
They are spending some money. It should be interesting, but do they have the pockets to compete? I don't think so.
Not long term. You know what? And I could live with it. I don't like it, but I could live with it if I lived in a town that did what Minnesota does. You started to mention Oakland. They do this. They get reeled down and work their way up, and then reeled down and work their way up. Pittsburgh's content just to stay way down.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay, they play in that absurd building, what it looks like the convention center with the low ceilings they play in.
And Montreal, don't forget.
Literally, there are more people at Applebee's on a Friday night than go to these games, and yet they're on an upswing and competing in the AL East, and the bottom's going to fall out. And they're going to be wretched for 10 years, but they'll build it back up. But yet Major League Baseball and the owners let this dope in Pittsburgh just say, I ain't even making an effort. I got a team that just came out of a year we won the wild card game. We're going back to the wild card game. It's, the trade deadline. We're a game and a half out of first place in the division, and I'm going to sell pieces.
Right.
And they let this go on. It's pooey.
All right, Mr. Fleeger.
Indeed.
Did you happen to catch any XFL?
A little bit. Truthfully, I forgot about it on Saturday. It was in my mind early on. I forgot about it Saturday. Heard a lot about it. Saw it on social media and on the Four Letter Network. So made a point to catch some Sunday.
To hear the Four Letter Network, it was the dawning of a new era.
Oh, well, they have the TV rights.
Yeah, it was so successful. And in context, the games on Saturday, I don't know what the average on Sundays pushed it to, but I know the games on Saturdays were over 17,000 in attendance, under 18,000. To put that in perspective, everyone on opening day averaged less than what the Pittsburgh Pirates did last year in home games.
Right.
Well, it's football. It was opening day.
Yeah, but it's football, but it's not football.
Well, my point being is to hear them tout how successful this was. I'm very dubious to think that this thing's going to last very long. The previous XFL, excuse me, on its opening day, it had a share of 9.5, which, if you think about it, in contrast, the Nationals and Nationals and Astros World Series.
Right.
Only 2 of those games beat a 9.5. That was the first go around.
Well, then that was that first one.
Right. But this is the reboot, the better than ever XFL.
But
I'm not trying to bash it because I give anybody credit trying to throw something out there a little different. I got the rules here in case people aren't familiar with it. Go over some of these touchdown rules and so forth. It's kind of interesting. But I just want to know what you thought about it. I'm still a little sketchy on it.
Well, here's the thing. All right, so let's go to that point. I actually had that jotted down. You know, how successful week 1 of that first iteration of that was. If you remember, I remember. Now, I'd have been right in that age, that targeted demo at that time that came out, kind of the early 20s. And it was during the WWF Attitude Era. You know, I think it was still the WWF back then. I could be wrong.
Probably, yeah.
And so everybody 25 and under was watching that. It was a big deal. And so it was being sold in that regard. And it was going to be no more of this wimpy football. And it's going to be gladiator. And then every commercial had all the cheerleaders look like strippers. And there was pyro. And it was exciting and it was fun. And it was just built for troglodyte, drunken 23-year-olds like I was at that time. And then you watched it in the Vince McMahon goes, "This is the NFL," and strippers everywhere and bombs going off, and man, this is awesome. And then they started playing football. Oh yeah, this sucks. And so it went away.
On the jerseys, "He hate me," and
right.
so forth. Yeah.
So I mean, it fit the time. It fit what the WWF/WWE was at that time. But then the product ended up not being very good. So I think the long-term sustainability of the XFL depends on if people look at it like you just described. Look, 17,000 people isn't a lot for a pro football game. I grant you that. 3 million viewers on average for the 4 games over the weekend in week 1 isn't a whole lot of viewers. It's an impressive number, but you're on Fox, you're on the main ESPN, you're on ABC. So those aren't big numbers. Here's the thing. It depends on what lens you're looking at it through. It depends on what your expectation. See, Vince McMahon didn't come in with all that this time. He now said, this is a legitimate football league. It's not a minor league to the NFL. You can't compare this to the NFL. This is just spring football.
Right.
This is what it is. If they can continue to maintain 15,000, because I'm sorry, even to say, the Pirates outpace them, as horrific as they is. That's pretty good grammar.
I understand.
That the clown show that goes on at PNC Park is big league sports. It's major professional sports. This is an alternative league. I don't even think you can view it in the context of a minor league, right? The NFL has the best and free minor league in the business, the NCAA football. And no one's ever going to mess with that. You can't compete with those two. So what I'm interested to find out going forward is there an appetite? Is the appetite in the United States, as Vince McMahon and a lot of people think, and ESPN obviously thinks, for more football? We don't care what it is. We just want more football. Or is it for the NFL and college football? And that's what we're going to find out. The product still wasn't very good, and that's going to be the downfall of it.
Well, but that goes to looking through what lens you're going to look through. If you're going to look at it thinking, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch pro football. Well, these are all guys that didn't make it in pro football, basically.
Right.
So if you're expecting, a game even like the Dolphins and the Bucs, you're not going to get it.
No.
Because the player's caliber is not there. But I agree with it. If you go in with the expectation, I don't know, just to watch a football game, or maybe to look at it as, well, maybe this is a chance for a guy that I liked a couple of years ago. Maybe he'll get his game back,
right.
or maybe he'll have another shot at the NFL. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think optics are a lot of it. So I went back and watched. I think they replayed on one of them, that very first game that was in D.C., and they're playing in that, I think it's called Audi Field, or it's some fancy car, but it's the pro soccer stadium in Washington, D.C. It holds 20,000 people. There were almost 18,000 people there. So it looked full. It was loud.
Yeah.
It was kind of exciting. Now, the team in New York was playing in MetLife. There was the same 17 or 18,000 people there. It looked like throwing a rock into the freaking Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
So you almost, I think maybe that's the first lesson. If you can create almost a scarcity to this, a rarity to it. Look, if this was somewhere near me, if there was a team in Pittsburgh and I could get in the door for $10 or $15 and it was pretty decent football, I think I'd follow it. I really do.
But I think
it gets a cult following like the minor league baseball team.
Well,
in the small
I think
town.
you really hit on it. If they were a little, I don't know, I would almost say smarter, maybe they wouldn't have approached such big cities like your St. Louis
right.
and so forth, and maybe went to, I don't know, I'm just trying to think, maybe not, maybe even Raleigh.
Something like, right.
Charleston, something of that nature. You go out west, I don't know, I'm trying to think of some smaller cities. I'm not great at that. Salt Lake City.
Put one in Des Moines. Something
Des Moines,
like that.
yes, exactly.
Because I think there's something they got to learn. I think the AF learned this lesson, though. I don't think you can go to the South. All right. All they care about is the SEC in college football because they had that Birmingham team. And I remember the talk leading up to it is, oh, my God, we got a pro football team in Alabama. They're going to be crawling all over each other. No. It's not Alabama.
But you still could tap a Richmond.
Something like
or
right.
something of that nature.
But I think Northeast, Midwest, smaller, mid-sized cities with a 20,000-seat stadium of some type. You put them in there. Now it builds some scarcity. When you watch it on TV, again, it doesn't look like an intra-squad scrimmage in MetLife Stadium.
Right.
I get wanting to be in the media centers for the TV, obviously, but I think it could be there. So it really just depends on what they want to be.
I agree.
And what they're trying. If you look at it through the lens of the NFL, even the NCAA, or as a minor league to the NFL or to pro football, it's not that. But there is one thing that jumped off the page to me about this, and we knew this about football, but I think when you see it at this level, it really sticks out. Good Lord, I think the
studio's falling apart here.
But one thing we have found loud and clear here is just how important the quarterback is to football. I think you get guys who are on the fringe NFL lineups who are playing in the XFL at running back, at wide. And look at some of the running backs you saw. Cameron Artis-Payne, going back to our fantasy days.
Yeah.
How many times you listened to me tell you how Cameron Artis-Payne was going to be the next coming of Walter Payton, that it never worked out. I saw Christine Michael out there. You look at how the receivers matched up against the corners. That all looks the same. Where it is so glaring is how bad the quarterback play was.
Right.
And it just grinds everything to a halt, and you were expecting to see some offense, and teams couldn't move the ball because the quarterback play is so horrific. That's a problem any secondary league for football was going to be because they can't find 32 legitimate NFL quarterbacks. Now to find 8 more to go out and run offenses. Look, the difference between the guy playing middle linebacker, the average, off the bench or low-end starter middle linebacker for an NFL team, there isn't a big chasm between him and the guy. There's a chasm, but not a huge one, and the guy doing it in the XFL. The difference in the quarterback play, that now if we get on TV, you can see I'm holding my big floppy arms as far out as possible. That's where it falls, and it makes it a bad product.
I agree.
That was my big takeaway on it.
I agree 100%. I don't know how much time we have, but I came across an interesting story.
Oh,
if you want to hear that.
I do.
All right. I mean, this isn't sports related. So if you have a sports topic when we're done, we'll jump right in.
Back, but we don't leave enough time for these oddities.
But there's a 38-year-old woman. She was suffering from nausea, vomiting, and an extremely swollen abdomen when she arrived at the hospital. She had suffered dramatic weight loss, losing 15 pounds over the previous 8 months after she lost her appetite.
Boy, I wish I could get that just for a month, whatever it was.
Well, the unnamed woman was rushed into surgery where a giant hairball was found lodged in her digestive tract with a small tail of hair trailing into her intestines and a second 4-centimeter hairball nestled deeper in her bowels. She was found to be suffering from the rare Rapunzel syndrome, which has only ever been documented 88 times in medical literature.
Well, there's enough times to get it a cool name, anyhow.
Yeah, really. The large hairball, measuring 15 by 10 centimeters, was removed from the woman's stomach. It's what it's called technically, Rapunzel syndrome. They have this big long name that I can't even pronounce. But what it is, it's someone who's addicted to pulling out their and eating their hair.
So does she have any hair on her head?
I don't know. She was an unnamed woman. They didn't publish her picture for crying out loud.
Does she have big patches missing?
I don't know. I mean, obviously someone would, recognize her if they posted a picture. But they did emergency surgery on her, and typical symptoms include nausea, vomiting, and abdominal distension and weight loss. Yeah, I can imagine.
Well, you're all plugged up airtight full of hair. What are you going to do?
She was also treated for malnutrition and was advised to eat food high in protein, such as eggs, chicken, and a daily iron supplement. So go figure.
Well, wouldn't hair have a lot of protein in it?
It doesn't digest, hence the hairball.
Well, that's true. It just sort of hangs out in there.
But I just thought that was weird. It had nothing to do with sports.
How do you go to work and explain that? Hey, I need a couple weeks off. I got to have a procedure.
Yeah.
What's the procedure? Well, I got to get a hairball removed. How does that conversation go?
I don't know.
All right, I don't know how you transition.
I'm a cat. I don't know.
But we got, about 10 minutes left, Rick. Can I just ask let's do some quick hitter NFL stuff.
I would love to.
When did Taysom Hill become Joe Montana? Have you followed this out
on Twitter
in the Twitter
about
sphere?
2 or 3 days ago?
This is unbelievable.
Well, it's just people trying to generate clicks and get people pulling their hair out with anger, but not eating it.
Yeah, don't eat it.
No,
there's the lesson
it'll bind you up there. But
that'd be a good show title. Don't eat it.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
He's 30 years old. And nobody have heard of this guy.
He hasn't had 20 pass attempts in the NFL.
Until this past year. No one heard of him. And he's 30 years old. And now, because he says he could be a franchise quarterback, obviously it's gospel. So
there are people, at least pretending to clamor online, that you should force Drew Brees out and hand this. I'd give it to Teddy Bridgewater before I gave it to this joke.
They were undefeated with Teddy Bridgewater, or lost one, whatever it was. I agree. I mean, yeah, he's a nice little gimmick piece.
Right.
And he's probably a great athlete. He's in the NFL. He's obviously a great athlete. But to say he's a franchise quarterback just because he says so and a couple of people on Twitter think so is ludicrous.
I don't even know what Taysom Hill's basing this on. Look, he should say, I'm coming up on free agency. I think I can be a starting quarterback. He should say that. So fine. Actually, I'm going to stop where I was
I
going to
would
go with
like
that.
to be a franchise
No, he can
quarterback.
even demand it. That's fine. I always defend guys, bet on yourself. That's fine. But for anybody to look at that and say, yes, I've seen enough from Taysom Hill to take up this argument, not only do I agree he could be a starting quarterback in the NFL, which sounds kind of dumb, but maybe it's not. Maybe he could be.
Over
but
who?
to say, let's shove Drew
What
Brees
team?
out of, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's my point.
He could have played for the Steelers last year. I mean, there's
temporarily,
there's
sure.
Right. I mean, we don't really know who he is, but if it's just maddening. I can't wrap my feeble brain around where all this nonsense has come from. It's craziness.
It is, and I mean, it's gotten, and you can tell football's over because if you spend any time on Twitter, everyone's losing their mind. I mean, what else is popular? Some guy standing a broom up on its bristles by itself.
What was that?
All of a sudden, it was something to do with NASA, some stupid tweet out there, and of course it was totally false. And people started standing their brooms up in their kitchen and showing it on Twitter, saying, "No, it's nothing to do with space. Everybody can do that." People are bored. Maybe this XFL will take off. I don't know.
Just so people quit playing with brooms and arguing about Taysom Hill.
Exactly. I mean, people during the football season argue over Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson.
Right.
Now we're talking about Taysom Hill being a franchise quarterback. Yeah, he probably could have been better than Duck Hodges was for the Steelers last year or Ryan Finley for the Bengals.
Right.
But to say that he's a franchise quarterback at 30 and he's thrown, 20
Less than
passes?
20 passes in his career. Yeah. It's a little different, and guys find this out, even going from college to the pros. So many guys find this out, which is why guys like Lamar Jackson, kind of these early on run first guys, become the exception, not the rule. Cordell Stewart's a perfect example when he played for the Steelers back in the 90s. When he was slash and he would come in on certain plays behind Neil O'Donnell and everything would be amazing. And then when it became his job and now the defenses are all, studying what you do for an entire week and
Right.
It doesn't work. And I'd argue Hill made some nice plays late in this season. But if anything, I think he's been a hindrance to I've screamed at the Saints and Peyton needs to stop doing that. You'll get that offense rolling and chugging along, and they'll get inside the 20, and they'll run some dumb gimmick to Taysom Hill and grind everything to a freaking halt. You've got Drew Brees and Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. Sit that joker down. Enough of him. He looks like an accountant anyhow. Sit him down. But now all this. Real quick, Phillip Rivers, Rick, officially a free agent. Does he play again this year?
Yeah.
Does he start this year?
I think, look, I was on Twitter talking to one of the sports guys on there. He moved to Florida for a reason. I think he knows where he's going. I think he's going to be a Buccaneer this year. And
do we really think the Bucs aren't going to sign Jameis Winston?
I'm not saying they're not going to sign him, but
I don't think Phillip Rivers is going to sign to back up. Or do you think he would? I don't think he said. Obviously, he's going to say, I want to be. Right.
I don't think he
someone's
will
going to
be back
guarantee
up.
him that starting job.
Sure. And my God, there's Jacksonville in Florida and there's Miami in Florida as well. I mean, we have all these teams.
Yeah, maybe Jacksonville. I didn't think about Jacksonville.
It's
Everyone
very possible.
assumed Tampa.
But I assume that he moved to Florida for a reason, not just because he wanted to play for Detroit. I mean,
Well,
that's
obvious.
Well, I mean, he's got like 1 million kids. I mean, if you're uprooting your family, and moving, I mean,
and moving from San Diego of all places.
Exactly. So I mean, that's just I have no clue, but that's just my gut feeling that somewhere in Florida he'll be playing.
Because I just got the Tampa thing bothers me. I've got to think
Jacksonville makes much more sense to me.
Yeah,
there's more. He's got weapons. The quarterbacks stink, and why not?
I know Bruce Arians doesn't seem to like him, but boy, I would. Maybe it's a fantasy thing. I'm so high on Jameis Winston. I think there's 12 teams in the league that should crawl over broken glass to get a hold of him, just because you can make things happen with him. You can make awful things happen, too.
Well, that's the thing. But, I mean, let's look at Phil Rivers the last couple of years.
Well, he's been awful.
He's been terrible.
Yeah.
And is there going to be this clamoring for Phil Rivers? He's 38 years old.
He's been great, but he's won nothing.
Exactly.
Nothing.
Exactly. And we've seen the clown. Oh, the Giants would have won 4 Super Bowls if they had Rivers instead of Eli. No, they wouldn't have. No, they wouldn't have.
No, because San Diego had better teams.
Yes, they
than some of those New York teams, and Phillip Rivers didn't win with them. I love the kid. I always rooted for him. I don't know why. I always had an affinity for him. But he couldn't find a way to get it done. He couldn't go into Pittsburgh. He couldn't go into New England. He couldn't go and win.
He was a war horse. I mean, I'll give him that.
Absolutely.
He played
a great quarterback.
Played divisional playoff with a torn ACL.
Right. Yeah.
And played fairly well.
Yeah.
But to say that he'd have won 4 with those Giants teams, no chance.
Little Steelers homerism. I pray Bruce Arians wants to let Jameis Winston go. I know they wouldn't do it and probably couldn't do it with the salary cap. If I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, I sign Jameis Winston right now. He would fit perfectly into that kind of freewheeling offense they want to play. Suck one more year out of Ben Roethlisberger. If he stinks 4 games into this year, you make the switch. Otherwise, you give him 1 more year. And I don't think that franchise misses a beat.
And after 2019, I dare say that seeing Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, them out of Pittsburgh, and what Mike Tomlin did with this team without Ben Roethlisberger, without James Conner, without Juju Smith-Schuster, and they were still an 8-game win, I'll tell you what, he'd do wonders with Jameis Winston. I really believe that.
No doubt about it. And when you have a defense that can overcome mistakes, and make no mistake, to say mistake way too many times, Ben Roethlisberger turns the ball over a lot too. So, boy, I think it'd be a perfect
And he's
fit.
the same age as Phillip Rivers.
Exactly. All right, well, we are out of time. Day late, dollar short, but I think it was worth the wait. So, again, you're welcome. So, thanks so much for joining us. Check out everything over at 12 Ounce Sports on the Twitters, 12ouncesports.com.
You better believe it. And it's just sports. That's all I can say. Don't get so excited about it because it's just sports. We're Fleeger and Briggs. We're glad you joined us. And, drop us a line. asylumfootball@gmail.com or it's just sports123@gmail.com.
At Asylum Football on the tweeters. Until next time, we'll see you.
Take care.